Hey there, hope all is well. Back at you with some Silver Doctors, what's hot in the news. And of course, whenever the president tweets, it always moves the market. And of course, the Dow had some issues today as well as all equity markets. And more importantly, there's been more talk about the consequences of this trade deal and this deficit situation where ultimately at the end of the day, it always comes back to hurt working class. And so no matter what the percentages are on the actual trade deficits, all our lives will be impacted in one way or another because the majority of the consumer items we use all originate from China. And by President Trump putting more pressure on China, forces them to have to respond in some way, which I'm sure will not be friendly towards the dollar. But today I have about 2 or 3 articles I want to share with you. More importantly, share my thoughts at the very end. So let's dive into this very first article. So here's a great article here that kind of summarizes everything that's taken place since last night when President Trump decided to tweet about putting more tariffs on Chinese goods here. And so it says, why did Trump threaten to raise China tariffs and what now? And so to give you an idea what's going on, it says stock markets around the world have sold off sharply after Donald Trump threatened to raise the stakes in simmering U.S. China trade war. Here are the answers to key questions and the rumbling disputes between the world's 2 largest economies. What is Trump threatening to do? In 2 tweets posted on Sunday afternoon, President accused China of trying to renegotiate the trade deal being hammered out between Washington and Beijing after months of talks. Trump threatened to ratchet up existing import tariffs of 10% on $200 billion of Chinese goods sold in the U.S. to 25% by this Friday. So here we have President Trump basically going from 10% to 25% on another $325 billion worth of goods here. At the same time that we're supposed to be having peace talks on how to resolve this whole trade issue. So one thing I always wondered, does Trump actually think that he can continue to slap the hands of the very country that funds our nation at this current point by purchasing our debt without them deciding to do something drastic one day in reference to buying our debt, nevertheless our currency? It says what tariffs are in place already. It says tariffs have been imposed by Washington on some Chinese goods sold in the U.S. for about a year as part of an ongoing dispute over trade. They come on top of broader tariffs used by Trump that have led China and other trading partners such as the EU, Canada, and Mexico on goods including steel and aluminum. Next part here says, why has markets reacted badly? It says stock markets have been lulled into a false sense of security. Hopes for a trade deal and the U.S. Federal Reserve backing away from raising interest rates have powered financial markets to the highest levels for 6 months, making them more vulnerable to bad news. It says, what does Trump hope to achieve? The root of dispute extends to Trump's America's First. So we all know that since President Trump has been in office, the whole narrative is to make America first, and he's vowed to redo every trade deal that has been put in place prior to his office, starting with the NAFTA deal between Mexico and Canada, which he believes is the best deal for America. Not quite sure what that means. So now we have his attempt at trying to make a better deal with China by threatening a shift from 10% to 25% by this upcoming Friday. So once again, this puts China in a very interesting situation because now it's a matter of how will they respond. Will they match those tariffs or will they decide to do something else? We're going to find out pretty soon. Next article here is from Market Watch, and it gives you an actual list of some of the things that will be impacted by these trade tariffs. It says why the U.S. China trade deficit is so huge. Here's all the stuff America imports. And so as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, majority of the things in our household and the majority of the things we use are probably on this list and they all originate from China. So what this might ultimately lead to is a higher price tag on all these goods and services that we buy or might be looking to buy in the near future. So give you an idea what's going on here. As you can see here, everything in the red. It says U.S. and China trade standoff. What's at stake? So it says U.S. imported a record $539 billion in goods from China in 2018, and a majority of it are computers and electronics. And so all the cell phones, all the technology we've so come to love and appreciate in this country fall into this category here of things that will probably go up in price pretty soon. We got electrical equipment, miscellaneous manufacturing, machinery, clothing, you name it. And then look at this little small speck of what we sent over to China. It says U.S. exported $120.3 billion in goods to China in 2018. And so here we have transportation equipment at $27.8 billion. So the question is, who's really getting the raw end of this deal where we actually get physical goods that we've come to enjoy, such as cell phones, laptops, refrigerators, clothing, and we send over transportation equipment. We send them debt IOUs. They send us physical goods. Who's really getting the best out of this deal? I'll let you be the judge of that. Now, the last article here is from the NPR, and it says Trump's threats to raise tariffs on China sends markets falling. And so here we have President Trump's latest threat to set higher tariffs on imports from China is raising fear. So here we have all the volatility in the stock market that's occurred today here in the U.S. as well as in China, all coming to fruition over the possibility of there being more of a spat between our 2 nations in reference to trade. It says stocks price opened sharply lower in the United States on Monday, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average down more than 450 points after Trump tweeted a vow on Sunday to raise tariffs. says early Monday, the Shanghai Composite Index plunged 5.6%. Here's a follow-up to Sunday night's tweet by the president here. It says, quote, the United States has been losing for many years $600 to $800 billion a year on trade. With China, we lose $500 billion. Sorry, we're not going to be doing that anymore, Trump said in a tweet on Monday. And so once again, who's really been losing out? They've been getting debt instruments. We've been getting goods and services. I think we've won that battle for now. So now I believe it's going to be a matter of how will the Chinese respond? Will they continue to take this pressure from the president, or will they decide to respond, possibly wanting a different form of payment outside of debt and notes? But we will see. So this is what's happening in the news. We all know that this trade deficit situation is nowhere near over. It will only probably get worse, in my opinion. But ultimately, what it boils down to is the trade deficits between us and them will hurt American workers, because if we're putting more pressure on China, it only backs them into a corner to where they're forced to make a decision as to whether or not they'll be willing to accept debt instruments in exchange for actual goods and services at a time where the world seems to be shifting away from the dollar altogether. And so not only is the global economy actually slowing down, and we can see that in a variety of factors, including here in the U.S., where there's been more job layoffs, more restructuring amongst corporations, but ultimately all corporations will be impacted by this trade deficit situation. It will interfere with corporation profits, and therefore they will have to make some decisions on their actual payroll as to whether or not they can remain profitable and continue to pay the extremely high salaries that more than likely they're paying for residents here in this country because of the cost of living being so high. In the midst of him trying to work out a great deal, I think he runs the risk of hurting a lot of U.S. citizens, which will then impact his chance of trying to run for president for a second term. So as time moves forward, we're going to hear more as well as feel more of these trade deficit spats between China and the U.S. So just something worth thinking about. Other than that, I would love to hear your thoughts on this whole trade deficit situation. Where do you see it going? Do you see it continuing on for some years now? Or will this come to an end in a very harsh way, impacting the dollar? Leave a comment down below. Looking forward to bringing you more news updates. Enjoy your day.